So everyone, please welcome Lisa Jane, right? Uh,
Yes.
McConnell, because I always forget the Jane. And my daughter is Ella Jane as well, but I always call her Ella. Eventually, Lisa is actually you are from
Wales originally.
Wales. Okay, but you used to live in uh,
I started practicing in Singapore, so I practiced in a
Singapore, yes.
number of years.
And now you are here in Malta.
I am. I'm in Vittoriosa. I've chosen to be located in the south because there's
Why?
very few of us here.
Yes, and we need you so much. And eventually, she's a very interesting practitioner. She's actually a holistic practitioner and specializing in certain instruments that few people may don't know exactly how. So she can also explain more about this, and because I am still also not knowledgeable enough. So please, Lisa, if you can introduce yourself to the people, and then we follow up with the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alex has given you my name. Nice to meet everybody that's out there today. I became a practitioner. I was in a corporate role for a number of years. Had my fair share of IBS symptoms due to travel and eating in hotels, etc., eating badly, skipping meals, whatever. Eventually I got near burnout, which led me to becoming a practitioner. I got the IBS diagnosis. I was treated fairly well by a medical doctor, but I had so many things just spiraling out of control, including my mood. As you will all know, with the IBS, that's some days the mood is just not up there, and I decided I am not going to go the happy pills route, like many of my colleagues that were traveling an equivalent amount to myself and working the hours that I was working. And I was fortunate enough to come across an anti-aging doctor, and I was put on some supplements. And then I asked about diet because I was putting that in my mouth as well. And the doctor said, I don't do that. And I said, okay, that's interesting. So I went to a dietitian and I took my supplements, and the dietitian said, I don't do that. So I thought, well, I'm putting all of it into my mouth. There must be one person that I can go to. And I went to a talk by Patrick Holford. I think it was on energy and digestive health. And I thought, that's what I want to be doing with my life. So I retrained a number of years ago, left the corporate world, and went into practice, and it's been amazing ever since. I started out with fairly simple cases, digestive issues, fatigue, etc. Eventually, because there weren't so many holistic practitioners in Singapore, I ended up taking on a lot of the chronic cases, which has led me to train and keep training, SIBO training, IBS training, Alzheimer's, you name it, the whole spectrum. I've seen a lot of it in clinic, and I've trained in a lot of it with international experts. And then to my recent training, which you were alluding to, I think, Alex.
Yeah.
I've been working with Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt to learn autonomic response testing. That's a kind of cross between bioresonance therapy and kinesiology, but it's actually very scientifically based.
Wow. Wow. Yes, I was referring to that. And you know, I feel you because I am in a similar route and I want to become a holistic practitioner myself. And it's not like you need just to focus on the digestion, but it's if you don't look at the whole picture, you whatever you are missing, that is coming, that will be a problem. What I feel from a personal experience is that being a kind of all-in-one person is actually creating the symptoms themselves, because it's like we are full of responsibilities, full of research, full of pressure, and multiple diagnoses. It's not like now you get used to the same issue and you know it by heart. You always need to check the book because this is something new. This is something new. So being a holistic practitioner really is not just hard, but there is a possibility to bring you back to sickness. Being a practitioner that is struggling with coping with all this knowledge coming. But I understand you. Once you know it and once you know how, it's difficult to let it go, right?
See, I'm on a different plane by now. So I managed to fix a lot of my own health problems, and I continue to do so. So IBS is gone, migraines are gone, food intolerances are gone, the chronic fatigue is gone, the brain fog's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I experiment a lot of myself, I must say. So
Yeah.
I don't usually give many things to a client that I haven't experimented with myself. I don't usually recommend practitioners that I haven't seen myself, etc., or at least talk to. So I tend to work in a holistic team.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes the pressure off, because I don't need to be all singing or dancing. But I do need to work on the basis of functional medicine and look at the person, their history, and their symptoms and the way things have developed. I need to look at all of that, and I need to say, for example, with diarrhea, how much stress are you under? Have you got emotional stresses? Same with IBS. Do I go that emotional side of things? What is the patient's telling? What is the client telling me? So it's the way I work is very patient-centered, and it's all about the client story. How did we get from healthy person to sick person, and how do we kind of move back towards healthy person?
Yeah.
This is sick person that's now medicated.
Yeah.
Or on a cupboard load of supplements. I don't agree with that either. It might be temporarily. You might need to be doing quite a few supplements to heal things.
Yeah.
But you need to be healing things, moving on to the next level of health.
Yeah. From experience, I understand that I have tools like essential oils that can help me cope or even heal on my side to eventually. The problem is that since I'm a father of two kids and these are still young and I try to support as much as possible, sometimes you even forget to take that pill. You have a regular commitment. I do my own pills, and eventually, if I miss that, I feel it that, I think I miss this because I am so into the family that I forget myself. So I understand the idea that, example, you said that now you are healed from a list of things. But I believe people also have a struggle to find the time, even they
Yeah.
have the knowledge to do that. They even have the money maybe to do that, but then they don't find the time to actually act on it. So this is something very important, and I see it especially in parenthood, which it's from experience, it's very difficult to heal while you are being a parent. Especially there are people who have like IBS, fibromyalgia, and other conditions. They are pregnant, and they come to me, and the pregnancy expands these symptoms. Sometimes they reduce it, but it depends on the person. And they tell me, please give me something, and I'm not risking something on while especially in the first 3 months. You need to really sacrifice a bit, so it's a bit hard, especially for women who most of the people are women who have IBS, and I am still not sure why. I think there is a reason about hormones that could possibly, and also hormone regulators that females take. So it could be a possible cause that is causing the IBS. But let's go on the first question, right?
Yes.
I love to speak to you. I love to know you, but people also are waiting for their answers. So one person said, why malabsorption happens? From your side, what do you think in regarding to IBS when you think about malabsorption?
It can be a range of factors. So if you've got anything that is causing inflammation, for example, that would, obviously your gut lining is then going to be inflamed. So that could be a reason, or you've got leaky gut. So what leaky gut is basically your gut lining is one cell thick, and it's bound together by proteins that we can think of as chewing gum sometimes. And when these cells kind of come apart, you can get things going through those gaps in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is meant to be in a very, very, very small size, and it's meant to go through this cellular wall, but through the cell itself, not through the gaps. So it's a bit like you've gate crashed. And on the other side of this cell wall is 80% of your immune system, because that's the interface between the outside world with all of its bacteria, etc., and your inside world, so your bloodstream that goes to your organs, etc., etc. So this is a hard border.
It's like the epithelium, how it is called?
Endothelium.
And endothelium line. It's like the for me, it's like the Great Wall,
It's like the Great Wall, but if it becomes permeable, it's like the Mexican border. And then you've got Trump's troops on the other side of that wall.
Do you think about because once you have this wall that's being broken,
if there's a breach,
this breached, bacteria, viruses, fungi can eventually pass on easily. What is the remedy for that? Like the very natural remedy for that? You
obviously need to keep those tight junctions tight. So those proteins need to not turn into chewing gum and go stretchy. But let me just back up a bit from there. What can also happen is you haven't got enough stomach acid. So you're getting bacteria that are not going through a sufficient acid bath. So then you can get a bacterial infection, or the bacteria can penetrate and the immune system sees it. And the immune system is going to attack whatever comes in. This is how you get food intolerances, et cetera, because the immune system's on high alert.
You mean like the body is highly alkaline? Example, it's one of the reasons.
No, so a lot of people do not have enough hydrochloric acid in their guts. So that your stomach, which is actually up here, not down here where most people think it is, your stomach, think of it like a tank which has two hatches. The hatch opens one way and it comes up here into your esophagus, and a lot of people get GERD, for example, if this hatch remains open. And then there's a hatch at the bottom, which lets things go further into your digestive system. Now, this tank, when you are thinking of eating something you're cooking and your brain's going, "Ooh, food's coming," it starts to basically, it would start to fill up the moment you ingest something and something hits that stomach acid. So you need a certain amount of stomach acid, especially if you're eating, for example, heavy proteins, et cetera, because the stomach acid is going to break down those proteins in the first phase.
Yeah. Is it the role of the body to have like stomach acid? Like, what can we do to increase it if it's low?
So various things. You can take apple cider vinegar. A lot of people do that on an empty stomach, or maybe not on an empty stomach for some people. You can take actually hydrochloric acid, so in tablet form. Some people need to do that. It levels naturally decline when you're over 55. If you are somebody that drinks water around your meals, that will obviously dilute. If you are taking alkaline water, that will dilute your stomach acid. There is a really easy home test to do that anybody can do at home. You take bicarb of soda, you put it in a glass of water, so you need about that much in a glass. And then you can take maybe 2 teaspoons of bicarb of soda, but please make sure it hasn't got aluminium in it, so that I like the Dove brand. And then you put that in there, and then you stir it around and you drink it sip for sip, maybe over a minute, and then you wait. So basically, you're waiting to see if there's a release of gas. So before that alkaline, which is your bicarb of soda, meets the acid, which is your stomach acid, yes, it will neutralize, but before that, there should be a biochemical reaction akin to an explosion. So if you have enough stomach acid, you should burp violently. If you don't have enough stomach acid and you're busy doing one for Queen and Country, going, oop, oop, then the indication is that you may not have enough stomach acid. Then what you can do is you can get some hydrochloric acid capsules, and you can take those up to the point where your stomach burns a little bit, and then go one back, and that is the dosage. That's what the Institute of Functional Medicine recommends.
And what about digestive enzymes?
Yes, you can use digestive enzymes. You need to, well, you can use generic ones. which would cover your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates. If you think you're intolerant to wheat or gluten, for example, there's gluten digesting enzymes, etc., etc. So you can take a broad spectrum one.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're having problems with fats, you might want to take one that's for lipids, for example. So a lipase-based one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're wanting to go, for example, natural and herbal, you can take papaya enzymes, or you can even work with food. You can have papayas around your meal. I would say before your meal. Don't necessarily eat fruit after dinner on top of your food, because then you might get fermentation, but you can have pineapple or papaya or mangosteen before your dinner.
Yeah. Wow.
On an empty stomach, and that's a natural way of getting around it. And
wow, beautiful. And the next question was about intestinal inflammation and eventually how it happens. So if you can go into more about intestinal inflammation, how the person got inflamed?
it's likely to be either a viral infection or a bacterial infection or a food intolerance, or there's something in your environment that you're taking in on an ongoing basis. And or your body is generally in an inflammatory state. So, for example, with an autoimmune condition, you've got a confused immune system. You would need to find out what is triggering it, what is confusing it, where it is in the body, and then address that. So again, it's the immune system trying to take care of you and give you a signal something is not right here. Of course, there are genetic variations, so you can be genetically predisposed to IBD or another one of those inflammatory bowel diseases. But
Wow.
that would just make you more susceptible. So genetics doesn't mean that you're going to get IBD. It just means that you've mismatched your environment and your genetics. So you need to really find out what is upsetting the system. What is the body actually trying to tell you it doesn't like?
Wow. So many things to consider, right? And the next question is about what are infections? And we explained about the viral and the fungal and the bacteria.
It can just be an imbalance, though. It can just be an imbalance.
So eating the same food every day, like
eating the same food every day can cause an imbalance in some people. If it's got a component in it which you're becoming less and less tolerant to, for example, with SIBO, it can happen. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It can happen that it was a past virus and that's confused the immune system, and it thinks it's like it sees something similar to the bacteria that caused the infection, because everything has a little bit of a flag on the outside of the cell. So it sees a similar flag and it thinks, whoa, okay, I'm going to destroy that now prophylactically, preventatively. I'm going to destroy that, and it ends up destroying certain parts of the gut, etc., etc. So in one type of SIBO, you might have had an infection, say, 10 years ago, and the body's still thinking, ooh, those nodules in one of my muscular parts of my digestive tract, they've got a similar flag. I'm not going to take any chances. I'm going to destroy it. And then your muscles don't work and things get stuck and the bacteria don't get down to where they're supposed to go. And then you end up maybe with an imbalance in your small intestine, but now in your large intestine where the bacteria is supposed to be, but in certain population densities that's balanced. But now you've got bacteria in the small intestine and they're seeing food that they shouldn't be seeing. And they're consuming food that they shouldn't be consuming, and they're producing gas as a response.
Wow. And
it's just wrong bacteria, wrong place, not necessarily always bad bacteria.
Today, most of the people are eating out.
Yes.
And today restaurants are not actually family run and the quality is going down. It's more productive than quality. So when you think about food poisoning and also about going the cheapest route, important to have the big plates and the cheap stuff. And when you think about also a possible contamination of the food being presented, many in the IBS support group came in after they eventually eaten out, and now their life has changed.
Yes.
And it's like, this is not just taking a course of antibiotics and it's done. It's a life-changing experience. You can become like a different person from that day on. As you said, that your body will keep on recognizing certain cells and possibly becoming a kind of autoimmune disease. So
yes, but the bigger thing going on there is, so you get the infection. Sometimes that will get tested and you'll know what the infection is and you get the appropriate antibiotic, etc., etc. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're just given an antibiotic, and in Singapore, trust me, they were given out like Smarties. Anything you come in with, we don't need to know if it's a viral infection, in which case mostly antibiotics are absolutely useless.
Yeah.
But you get the antibiotic. So antibiotics, unless they're the ones that are contained in the small intestines, which are specific to SIBO, they're going to wipe out your entire, well, not your entire, but a large part of your microbiome. Now, this is a bit of a space game. So you've got good bacteria. Every bacteria has a specific function in your gut. There's few of them that are not supposed to be there, but a few of them that are supposed to be there, but in a small population. And when that gets out of control, it's problematic. Yeast is supposed to be in your gut, but when you level that playing field, yeast is one of the first things to grow back. And then a lot of the pathogenic and overgrowth bacteria will also grow back. Now it's like Malta, densely populated. So if you take down all of the old houses, you're just gonna get an ugly apartment building going in its place.
Yeah.
And that is yeast. It will take over.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
it can take you about 2 years to really get your gut microbiome back.
wow.
That's something to bear in mind when, sometimes antibiotics are the only option, but they don't come without consequences. So if you've had the antibiotic and then your bowel habits have changed, your sleep pattern even, your mood, etc., etc. Your gut microbiome does so many things than just digesting your food.
Yeah, of course. Wow. And you know, also once you have a kind of food poisoning, if you are not diagnosed well, or let's say misdiagnosed, even the prescription itself can put you in a chain reaction of eventually getting a kind of disease. So as you said, if you have a viral infection and you take antibiotics, actually it's not going to do nothing, but it's going to make it worse because your immune system is going to go down. So once you have a misdiagnosis, you can get into another place of really it's very dark, and it's not actually from the first, because you always find the source why I got this infection, but it's not just about the infection, but whatever you did after it as well.
Yes, you always need to heal from that. And I know gastroenterologists hate this. They do a burn and then nourish tactic. So they give the antibiotics. Then if they're good, they would give probiotics at very high doses. I tend to think that, for example, in South Africa, when the last time I had antibiotics, which is pretty much probably about 15 years ago.
Wow.
I went with the antibiotics prescribed, but then I immediately, well, no, actually the doctor gave me the probiotics to go with that. And I would always recommend that you do an antifungal. So Saccharomyces boulardii, which is going to crowd out the pathogenic or the potentially pathogenic yeasts, and make sure that they don't take over your playing field.
Yeah. And since we are speaking about antibiotics, today, when you think about the meat industry, you don't know that you are actually consuming antibiotics too. So how can the people understand this, that, you know, this meat is probably causing an inefficacy of the antibiotics if you need them, you know? So it's important to find a source of meat, if you are eating meat, that is not antibiotic. But the point is this: why they give antibiotics to the animals? Because the animal, if they don't take the antibiotic, can actually have a kind of infection that itself. So what would the consumer do in that case? Would I eat or not? How is the solution for that?
You see, the reason they have to preventatively give cows and battery held chickens and farm fish the antibiotics, it's a preventative because there's so many of them in one small space. So think of it just as they're all pooping in the same space. So yes, there's going to be a lot of bacteria, etc., around. So preventatively, yes, you will have to give them herd antibiotics. But if you've got chickens, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem with E. coli in chickens that are running around, etc., etc. You do have to be careful of that. But there's much less chance of you taking in the antibiotics because they don't have to give them any. It's like if we humans lived 20 to a room, and that was during COVID, all 20 of us are going to get COVID. So you need to take a prophylactic action. So I would say if you have a grass-fed cow that's So a certified organic, that means it's not going to be given the growth hormones either, because that's something you have to be aware of when it comes to particularly hormones, etc., etc. That interferes with your hormones massively.
Yeah.
So grass-fed for me is one thing that I look for. I've actually managed to find organic beef in Malta. I've managed to find organic chicken. So I'm quite happy with my food choices in Malta. I don't eat pork, but that's for reasons of whatever toxins the pig has can transfer into the human, because I'm guessing most people don't know this, but when you have a heart bypass and they put a stent in, it's pig skin, because the body, it's closest to our own tissue, so the body won't reject that. So whatever transfers into their fibers and their skin, when we put it in our body, it can just migrate into our body a lot easier than it can for a cow, because they haven't got similar tissues.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I would say be careful with that, but I'd also like to point a word towards the vegetarians and the vegans that are saying, well, I'm safe. There's also glyphosate on your vegetables, and I was having a conversation with an organic farmer this morning, where we were talking about at the farmers market here in Birgu. Where we were talking about glyphosate, and we were talking about it's pretty much impossible to get anything without glyphosate these days, because it's in the air, it's in the atmosphere. But at least if you're going for a farmer that's not spraying it directly on your produce, so you're looking as much as you can for organic. And I know you're going to come up with the cost issue here, but what I practice and what I ask people to do is pragmatic organic. So there are certain things that retain those pesticides. So glyphosate, I'll backtrack a bit. Glyphosate is actually a pesticide. What it does is it basically alters your gut microbiome, and it can integrate into your digestive tract. So this is another thing that we're talking about, the health of your digestive tract itself. It is a glycine molecule, and your digestive tract, so that's an amino acid, your digestive tract, particularly the muscles that contract, have a lot of glycine in them. Now, this glyphosate molecule has a glycine molecule, but with a phosphate kind of chunk on it. So that can basically integrate into your gut lining, and then people can't actually, their guts don't actually contract properly.
Yeah. You know, when you said about organic, that eventually it's expensive, and I believe even grass-fed meat is expensive, and usually with the inflation that is happening, people are becoming like kind of let's say in below medium range, and they don't afford certain nutrition. What happens is that the cheap for the poor makes the people poorer, because they make them sick, because they eventually, what are you explaining here is that every kind of product that is cheap has these kind of additives that are being introduced to the animal or to the plants to produce in a mass produce, but eventually this is producing a side effect, because this is something that it's it's very, you know, I cannot understand how can a poor man work with very minimum wage example and eventually not getting sick from this. You need to really have a good genetic body that is ready to tolerate all these things at once. We are leaving all the stress apart, because I believe that people who need money, they need to work even 12 hours a day, and you know, so it's so much hard to see this availability. You know, if this additive makes people sick, why you are adding to it, to the produce, to the animals? It's possibly there's nothing we can do.
There is a debate around we need to feed the world, there's more people in the world, etc., etc. So we need higher yields. We can't have the crops falling to bacteria, etc., etc. I'll leave that global debate where it is. So I'm not getting into that because I can't explain the logic, to be fair. But what I can say on the positive side is, if you are conscious and if you are doing things in a smart way, as I said, I practice pragmatic organic. So that means that I'll get certain things, I'll buy organic, I'll just maybe buy less of those vegetables or fruits that retain the pesticides. I'll buy more of the clean 15, which doesn't retain so much. And anything in between where I'm like, I'm not paying 15 euros for some celery. But I would like to have celery. I've got a proper vegetable wash. I spray it. It at least takes the surface pesticides off. So then I'm happy eating that. That's kind of a compromise for me. So I will go to the market, and if in the winter I want soup, I want a vegetable soup, the guy sells kolosh for 250 and I get a massive bag. And then I'll just bring it home and I'll spray what is on my dirty dozen list. Well, I'll actually spray everything and wash the surface pesticides off, and then I'll make my soup. It's €2.50.
Yeah.
I throw it in a pot. It's not even going to take me that much time. I just do a bit of chopping, throw it in the pot, and then I've got a soup.
Well, what kind of spray, if you may want to share?
It's actually, I don't know if I'll be able to get this into Malta, but it was actually developed in Taiwan. And it's just for food-based ingredients. So, for example, coconut oil is one of the ingredients. And I basically I dilute that with water and I spray it on my vegetables. And at some point, I can send you a video. And it comes from Taiwan because the Taiwanese government realized that they had a problem with their high disease rate or their high disease burden. And they actually researched it, and they discovered that because they're also a tiny country, they had a problem with glyphosate and pesticides. So the government worked with researchers, etc., to develop this spray.
Wow. No, I would be interested to also think about.
White vinegar is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. But still, I don't like the aftertaste. The aftertaste of the vinegar. I don't like. I want something more subtle. So it would be. I would think something about essential oil that I can spray and mix with water, and I can also adjust, which is also
some people might have a water filter that allows them to basically have the alkaline water or the acid water for their vegetables, etc., etc. That will kill some things off.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so it's
And
just a matter of, but glyphosate is a big one in my view for IBS, because it is meant to kill bacteria and it has such an impact on your gut microbiome, and it leaves you open to imbalances and opportunistic pathogens and yeasts.
Mhm.
And not only that, what it kills is a lot of the bacteria that make your amino acids that are involved in mood and your brain chemistry.
Yeah, and they spray it eventually for the bad bacteria, but then they kill off like the antibiotics. It's like a bomb, you know.
It's like having antibiotics, antibiotic coated vegetables,
Mhm.
or
What?
antibiotic coated. So, for example, cotton is a crop
Mhm.
that's heavily, heavily sprayed. So when you have cotton, we all think we're doing ourselves a favor with cotton, but unless it's organic cotton, it's going to have retained some of that glyphosate. So some very sensitive people may even have to have organic cotton.
Actually, for babies, they all say 100% cotton is very important, right? But as you say,
there's a
not.
lot of organic cotton out there now for babies, and it's in the shops in Malta. So I'm guessing that most people don't know that Superdry, for example, does organic cotton jeans. Most of their cotton is organic.
Wow. Wow, beautiful.
So it's really yes, there is a divide, and I'm conscious of this, between the people that can afford to do all of this and the people that can't afford to do it, or they've got other priorities. So, for example, the kids' education might be costing a fortune. But if you are conscious and you slowly, like you said, you were a bit overwhelmed by building your repertoire, it's slow incremental steps and advances in consciousness, and you all of a sudden you're doing things completely differently.
Yeah.
So as long as you're conscious and you're looking for things, and you go to the farmer like I did this morning and say, oh, is that organic by any chance? And then you get into a conversation, and then they're bringing your vegetables next week.
Yeah. Wow. About organic example, there is also the problem of importation, because it's not just about organic nature, but even once you cut that fruit or vegetable, if you bring it from Spain and you transport it apart the pollution that's causing for the delivery, but let's put that aside.
So, but Alex, it's the organic community here, the organic farmers. There's lots of young people coming into this space, and they are really trying. And they are trying not to have food waste, and they are trying not to have it at high prices, etc., etc. I'm not saying that at this point that it's a low percentage of the farmers at this point, but it's also to do with the consumers. And there's a larger growing community of farmers here trying to make it affordable for everybody. So when I compared the prices, when there was one young organic farmer, and he was one of the first at the farmers market when it reopened here in Birgu.
Mm-hmm.
And his prices were way competitive with the other farmers, the vegetable sellers, etc., etc. It was so affordable. And if you went to him at the end of the market, you could have bought crates to feed a family, because they would rather discount than throw food away.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So these are just the tricks. I know it's difficult and it takes more planning to do it on a budget, but it's not impossible.
Wow.
Anybody out there that's listening, it's not impossible in Malta, but you do need to be pragmatic. You're not going to have everything organic unless you do have big money. But just support what you've got in country.
What do you think about cooking, example, vegetables? Because we are speaking about the bacteria here.
Mm-hmm.
So once you cook, once you heat, the bacteria is gone, right? So would you recommend for vegetarians especially that there should be like a mix of raw and cooked, or how do you recommend?
That's really going to depend on your gut health. So not everybody, and believe me, I've tried it, not everybody can tolerate raw. For a lot of people, it's actually too much fiber. So I've seen a lot of diarrhea because people were getting too much fiber, or because kids had too healthy a diet. And we've had to change that. Yeah, it depends on your gut health, as well as fermenting, for example. You can put the bacteria back in sauerkraut, kimchi, you know, all of those nice dishes. I'm sure there's pickles that people have here. You can definitely put the bacteria back in doing that, but you raise the histamine levels. So a lot of people may not tolerate that in the beginning until you fix the peripheries of what's triggering histamine. Again, it's why is the immune system overreacting to things?
Yeah.
Why can't I have sauerkraut juice without being really sick? And people that are reacting to histamine would get hives or an outbreak, or they'd feel really sick, or they'd get terrible brain fog.
Wow.
So it really does depend. And this is what I find in clinic every day. Once you work with people and they explain things, or they've done a food journal and explained, they've looked at their poop. People need to start looking at their poop. I'm very sorry. They do need to start looking at their own poop, not just their kids' poop. And then once people have correlated my poop with how I'm feeling, etc., and my digestive issues, and they start to see correlations. Obviously, I'm trained to see these things, and I'll go, oh yes, no, you had tomatoes, maybe tomatoes don't agree with you, or you had this, maybe that doesn't agree with you, it salicylates or whatever. But once I start going through that process with them, or once they start journaling, they start going, ooh, I think it was when I had, I don't know, honey. After that, there can be a bit of a time lag, so it's different for people to, it's difficult to people to maybe pass that out when the immune reaction is happening 2 weeks later. But with immediate things, people go, oh gosh, I feel terrible every time I eat that. what I find in clinic, once you start focusing on that and people develop a consciousness around how their body feels and when it changes, once they start getting in tune with their own bodies, then they start coming to me and saying, you know what, I think I need to test for this. I think I've got a food intolerance to this because every time I do that, this happens and this happens and then that happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about getting in tune with yourself. And I think with watching TV, being on the internet and being on our mobile devices, and there's just so much going on in everybody's life that you forget to listen to yourself.
Yeah, that's why meditation is important, right?
For some people, yes. For some people, it's frustrating.
Until you adapt. It's like the microbiome adapting to
It is.
the raw vegetables.
It is like the microbiome adapting and then being able to know what it's supposed to do with the raw vegetables.
Yeah. Wow. Let's speak about, I have another question about the microbiome and dysbiosis.
Mm-hmm.
So we spoke about bacteria, fungi, viruses. Eventually, these are that also promotes the imbalance. But there is also this kind of prescription from the professors that eventually say, you know, you need to go on a low FODMAP diet.
Mm.
And there are people in our group who stick to that for years, you know. They are still in our group and the problem is not solved. They claim the symptoms are better, even though sometimes they kind of relapse again. So what do you think about this suggestion of being on the low FODMAP? Is it actually good or not?
It's like it's a therapeutic diet. So it's an elimination diet, and most elimination diets should be viewed as just that. You eliminate certain things for a period of time. So because the low FODMAP diet takes a lot of foods out of your diet. So it should be positioned to people as a time-limited diet, because working with SIBO, with a lot of SIBO cases and training a lot in SIBO with SIBO specialist doctors, what I now know is that the low FODMAP diet in a context of SIBO, you can have the SIBO with diarrhea, you can have the SIBO hydrogen and the SIBO methane. But there's a third type of SIBO. And that type of SIBO tends to come around when somebody's been on a low FODMAP diet for a very long time. So by doing that diet long term, you might have got rid of one side of the SIBO symptoms, but you might have slipped into what we call SIBO hydrogen sulfide, or even LIBO, which is the large intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those two things can come about if you've been doing the low FODMAP diet for too long a period of time. And that will vary individually for how long you need to follow it to get symptomatic relief and for things to start healing. And then you need to kind of start reintroducing things.
Yeah. What about the microbiome and the relationship with the gut brain?
Oh, my favorite topic.
Wow.
That's one of my favorite topics.
Me too.
So, massive experience with that. I've seen obviously a lot of people where it was they did have an acute bacterial infection, so they were given the antibiotics. Partially it was touch and go, so some people had intravenous antibiotics. Whoa, the brain fog, the mood issues, anxiety that some people experience, not everybody, but some people really experienced, all of a sudden they were having panic attacks, etc., etc. And you know, you've got the antibiotics, and then that takes out your bacteria, but a lot of the time you've also got a problem with yeasts. Now, one of the problems with yeasts or molds is that they produce a whole host of toxins, and they are more symptomatic for you than actually the bacteria everywhere or the actual yeast itself is going to be. So there's that aspect to consider as well. Are you giving something the range to overgrow, or are you missing a part of the puzzle that's going to affect your brain, etc., etc.? And then an imbalanced microbiome is going to affect the brain in and of itself, because it's going to create inflammation. So again, it depends what your brain health is like. And your brain also has its own microbiome. So there is a brain microbiome. So when you have antibiotics, if you have antibiotics that can cross that blood-brain barrier, which is the hard barrier between your systemic circulation, so your systemic blood, and your systemic immune system, and the immune system, the special immune system, and basically the filtered blood supply, that it surrounds your brain. So if an antibiotic can cross that blood-brain barrier, it's going to affect your brain microbiome as well.
Wow.
And then you have the problem of, how do you fix that? Because there's only certain bacteria that you and certain ways that your brain will let bacteria cross that same blood-brain barrier.
My God. And when I think about mold in Malta, and how the buildings are being built, apart the humidity, it's always high. And example, my residence is like underneath five apartments, and it's like around like a fortress. In winter, we barely see sunlight.
Wow.
And if you don't open the drawers or whatever, the doors, for even a few days, they become, you smell them, truly. So we need to clean, and eventually with antifungal oils, example, I try to, but it's something that it's not always we can do that, you know. It's really puts us into a position that, you know, we cannot not even sometimes clean the house with these kids. So this is something that we experience, mold, which we go to the toxic environment, why inflammation is happening. And it's a chain reaction of what we are eating, not just from our mouth, but also from our all senses, you know. So this is, it's truly becoming a toxic environment.
It's I've only been in Malta for just over a year now, but I obviously I lived in Singapore before, so I was in a very humid environment. So by default, I ended up doing a lot of mold toxicity training. So, and with some of my peers and my doctor friends, we kind of formed a little circle that was dealing a lot with mold toxicity, and we found that once we got to the bottom of that, so we would have people that we got better with IBS or SIBO, etc., but then they would keep relapsing, or something else would happen, or they would have fibromyalgia, or they would have kidney stones, or they would have something. And then finally we realized that some of what was going on with them, if it was in their history or in their home, was actually mold toxicity. So when we addressed the mold toxicity, we could recover quite a few people. So, but there are again, you know, there is the risk that there would then be this divide between the people that can afford to have big houses with big windows, etc., and the people that are in apartments. But again, there are practical workarounds, which I think you'll like, so I'll discuss those with you. There are very practical workarounds.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah. And from my case, what I do, because cleaning everything and really investing in a kind of residence that it's mold free, it's really expensive. What I do is that every a period of time, it depends, could be every month, every 3 months, I do like a detox program. And I truly cleanse my body. I try to relax as much as possible, and I really purge. Like, I mean, I really flush out everything that I have. So, is it a good idea to have like a regular detoxification, just in case? It doesn't mean you don't have any problems. So we are not waiting for a problem to happen, right? So should we detox before, or is it just for those people who are sick?
No. So I do regular detoxes. I haven't done one in Malta yet, so I'm not quite sure how that's gonna work out and where I'm gonna get all of my particular
Okay.
from. But no, I think most people should be trying to do a liver gallbladder detox on a regular basis. You know, if you once, twice a year, if you can do it every 3 months, a lot of people will benefit from that. But if you've got mold toxicity, first of all, you've got to clean up the environment, because if the thing about mold toxins is you cannot see them in the air, but they're so tiny that you breathe them in and they can go right through your lungs. They're tiny. They can go right through your lungs into basically your circulation. So
Yeah, it's
so
a way.
I do see myself partially kind of going that mold toxicity route in Malta, because I'm starting to see more and more people that have that as a specific issue. So we're bringing in more and more kind of various testing possibilities that you can do, etc. Or you can just go and get yourself an agar plate and see what actually grows in your house. That's a good indication. So there are less expensive workarounds.
Wow.
You don't need to completely refurb your house or anything, unless you can afford to, and that's something you want to do, but you want to be careful when you're doing that too.
Of course. So
I'm doing that at the moment, and I'm militant about what's coming into my house.
Let's move on the last 2 questions, if you have more time. Is it okay for you?
I need to see a guy about some tiles in a minute.
Okay, so if it comes, we can
Yeah,
end
if
this
somebody
here.
knocks on the door, I'll have to drop off.
So there is a question about hormones and IBS, and if you know why more females are diagnosed with IBS rather than males. I just made a kind of research about testosterone, which actually protect against. So eventually, those males who are high in testosterone are most probably that don't suffer from IBS, or at least they are less prone.
Interesting. I haven't actually seen that research. And I actually haven't looked into IBS in relation to your sex hormones. But I will do so now. What I can imagine is that it's more to do with cortisol, your stress hormone. I think, and I'm not saying this is the case for all males. I'll be very honest about that. But I think women have a tendency to multitask more. So the stress levels are higher and the cortisol levels probably go up. If the cortisol levels go up, it's the stress response. And cortisol, basically, when you have the stress response, what happens is you kick out adrenaline, and that shifts the balance of resources, because you don't need to digest when you're under stress. You've got a saber-toothed tiger that's going to eat you or bite you or whatever.
Yeah.
So you don't need to digest. You don't need your immune defenses. Well, you do need your immune defenses, but it's going to bite you. So you need them under the skin. You don't need them in your gut, for example. So the body shifts resources. And then for a slight time, your cortisol will take over from your adrenaline. So you'll be producing high amounts of cortisol. And again, that shift in your immune system, cortisol is an immune suppressant, and you don't need to eat. So your digestive system shuts down when you're under stress.
Wow.
I think that's more the link. I think that's more the link. The cortisol actually shuts down your digestion because it's part of that innate stress response.
Wow. What do you think about cortisol and shift work? People working on night shift, example.
Yeah, that's a biological clock question. The body does have a very biological clock, and it does have times of the day or night when it's going to be working very hard. So, for example, people that don't sleep, they're always getting up at like 2, 3 o'clock. That can be a liver thing, because that's when your liver's working hard, etc., etc. And the point at which your body clock changes is around about the 9, 10 o'clock mark. If you miss that, if you go past it, then you're going to get through your night shift. But your body's going to be a bit confused in terms of, well, what organ am I supposed to be prioritizing now? So
wow.
You possibly can or override it with the hormones, because at that point you have a shift in hormones and a shift in immune system activity. So you could possibly, theoretically, work with melatonin. That might trick your body into thinking, oh, well, now it's actually time to make the other switches too.
I don't like to trick. That will cause another problem and another problem. It's like putting an additive over an additive, Well, let's see the last question about, is it how can you understand that IBS is a physical or a mental or both illness?
By a very good first intake consultation.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very comprehensive intake questionnaire where people often come in to see me for the first time, and they literally say, why did you need to know all of that? It took you hours to fill out your questionnaire. And it's basically, I was trying to make you think about things that might have happened in the past. As I said in the beginning, your story. And when you're sitting in front of me, are you constantly on edge? Are you kind of jumpy? Then you've got definitely got a problem with your nervous system being overactive. And I can deduce from that, are you speaking quickly, or are you looking for words? I can kind of deduce for that. And I will say to people, you know, I've noticed you're looking for words. How long have you had brain fog? And they're like, oh, how did you know?
Wow. So from the first consultation, you understand if the person needs to go deeper on the physical or the mental. What if you understand it's a mental issue and the client denies it, like, no, I don't want to go there, even if it's a childhood trauma, you know?
Look, it's their consultation, it's their time. If a client says to me, I don't want to go there, I don't want to be put in that basket, or I'm happy with my drugs, I just want to know what I can do to make things better. It's always client-centered. So the client leads, and then I never accept no for an answer. I can't do that. Okay, you can't do that. But what can you do? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can we move on and do something different? What is doable in your work, in your day, with your budget?
Wow, beautiful.
So it should always be about the client. It's not about me as a practitioner. It's about what you can do, because this is your journey, this is your health, and you should be in control. You should be empowered to help yourself.
Wow, beautiful, Lisa. So please, if anyone is interested to connect with Lisa and eventually make a first consultation, please, can you share what can they do eventually to connect with you deeper?
I can, but there's one thing I forgot to say.
Yes, please.
If people are out there and they have been struggling with IBS and things around it, etc., and it's been debilitating, and it's been a long time, and it's been frustrating because they're not listened to, there is going to be an emotional component to that, because that is akin to a trauma. So you're going to have to, your brain is going to start at some point running a loop, which is often referred to as sickness behavior. And it will be subconscious, and you'll be saying, I want to get well, I want to get well, and you'll be doing all of these things. But sometimes you have to go into the part of the brain that stores those loops, and you have to retrain it.
Wow, it's work. It's work as well, right?
It's work, but you feel so much better. So a lot of my clients have they've been really upset with me in their first consultation when I've said to them, there will be a point in your life, if we work together well and you do what you need to do for you, where you look back on this and you say, thank you, I was ill. Maybe not for so long, but thank you that I had this bag to carry, because now I'm more of a conscious person, and I can help myself, and I can help my family, and I can help my relatives. So it's actually a good thing, because it catapulted me into awareness and self-help.
Oh, wow.
It's where I want to get people to that have been sick for so long, that they say, actually, it's actually a good thing that happened. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't fun. It was terribly frustrating. It was painful. It was debilitating. It did a lot of maybe damage to my life. But eventually I've come out of the other side, and there's a lot more light.
Wow. Let's end here, because it was a very beautiful conclusion. Like, please share how can they connect with you, and what can they do eventually to...
Okay, so I'm a bit of a techno ditz. I'm still on email. So hello@healthofhumankind.com is probably the best way to get to me. I'm not very good with the phone. I don't have WhatsApp. I am a dinosaur. And otherwise, you can pop by and see me if I've got a minute or two in Vittoriosa Pharmacy, 3rd floor in Birgu. So,
Wow.
the best
Okay.
way to connect to me.
Beautiful. And thank you very much for eventually being here and supporting the IBS Malta support group, and even others who may see this in time. It could be even in 5 years, so I hope you will
My
still be...
pleasure. If we want to do this sometime in an in-person small group, then
Of
I'm
course.
open to that.
Wow. Yes, for sure. For sure. Thank you very much, Lisa.
You're
And
very welcome. Thank you, Alex. And thank you for bringing together the community, because I know from experience that it's damn frustrating and nobody listens to you. And sometimes it's even embarrassing when you have IBS. That was one of my biggest things. It was painful, but it was very embarrassing when you have to kind of step aside and go, oh, I think it was the granny.
wow. Yeah. Have a nice evening.
Okay, you too. Everybody
Yeah.
out there, have a lovely evening. Enjoy
Bye-bye.
your dinner, hopefully.
See you.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Bye,
Thanks.
Lisa.